All right, guys. So first and foremost, thanks for being here. We obviously have a lot of multiple offer situations going on, so we've got to really start mastering how we handle these situations. And it might get kind of confusing and tricky because we have so many different caveats and different sides to look through when we're kind of dealing with this. But we're going to do our best to try to keep it focused on one side at a time. And if I bounce around too much, just let me know. So you guys should have received a copy of the PowerPoint that we're going to go through. It goes in order up and down. It's kind of wonky, so you're just going to have to muscle through that. It's on a Google Drive, so I will also share that with you guys later this afternoon. And it has 2 additional slides in it that I just put in there that I somehow deleted last night successfully. So I will resend it out later, but also you should have received 3 forms. So the first form is a rejection form, you have an escalation clause, and then you have another rejection form. So we'll talk more about those here in a minute. All right. So before we get started, one quick note as well. If you guys have anything that you want on live Caravan tomorrow, please let us know before noon today, so that way we can actually get prepared for that and get the seller's permission to do that. So just a sidebar on that. All right, so let's talk about multiple offers and get into this. So multiple offers we know can be really, really emotional. They can be really stressful. They can be tense. They can be exciting, but they're really complex and they're really dynamic, meaning that they have a lot of different layers to them on a lot of different avenues. Every offer is going to have a lot of different caveats to it. So that kind of makes it a little bit more stressful and anxiety provoking than what we think. General details of multiple offers, we know sellers want to get the highest and best price possible. That's why they put their house on the market. We know buyers want to get the lowest and best price possible. That's why they're negotiating, right? We know that the listing brokers represent the seller's best interest, and we know that the selling broker represents the buyer's best interest. So right from the start, you have 2 people who are kind of, oh, I'm protecting my party and you're protecting your party, so therefore we should be antagonistic toward each other. But that really doesn't work. You guys usually, Carolina 1 to Carolina 1, do a great job with that. But sometimes I know coming from the other side, you might find an agent from another company, certainly not from our office or Carolina 1, that likes to negotiate on behalf of their clients really, really tough. And sometimes they realize that, or they don't realize that they're actually not the ones making the decisions. So we've got to keep that part in mind. And the other interesting thought about this is that the fall through rate on multiple offers is actually higher than it is on single offer transactions. And I think a lot of that goes to the anxiety and emotions involved in multiple offers. So it's just something to keep in mind. Realtors in multiple offer situations are required to fulfill the obligations to their clients. So keep that in mind if you're a transaction broker, which means if you are representing a seller and somebody comes to you and says, hey, Cindy, even though you're listing my house, I want you to find the buyer, and Cindy finds the buyer, now she's in a predicament where she can either become a dual agent, she can refer it to somebody in the office and become a designated agent, or she can keep that extra, the buyer, the extra communication as a transaction relationship, still receive the 3% commission that she would have if she was paying a buyer's agent, and then also still represent her seller. And that is the preferred way to go. We really don't want dual agency, especially in multiple offers in this market. So avoid it at all costs, but maintain the obligations that you have based on the agreement that you have with the client or the customer. Obviously, the Code of Ethics obligates realtors to be honest with all parties. That doesn't mean share some information with one party and not with the other. You have to be very careful about that. We have to present all offers and counteroffers quickly and objectively, and we have to cooperate with the other brokers. You guys know all this. All right, so what do sellers need to know? And this is very similar to what buyers need to know about multiple offers. It's possible, and in fact, it could be highly likely that we end up in multiple offers almost all the time right now, especially at certain price points. There's advantages and disadvantages to every single negotiation strategy. Sometimes sellers really think, yeah, let's get multiple offers, let's price it really low, and then let's create a bidding war, and then we'll have multiple offers, and we'll go $50,000 over list price. Well, that's exciting, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the seller, right? The seller is going to determine how the process goes. We have to keep that in mind because agents often get caught up in the excitement and the thrill of multiple offers. And it's not required to ask for highest and best. Is that a surprise to anybody? Often it is, especially when you're the buyer's agent. and they don't even disclose there's multiple offers, and then you lose. That happened to me personally. And the agent, it was a townhouse in my neighborhood. I wanted to buy it. I wrote her a full price offer, and she never even told me we were multiple offers. And she wrote to me and said, hey, guess what? I took another offer. And I'm like, what? You didn't even tell me there was another offer. So it's frustrating, but they don't have to do it if they don't want to. So keep that part in mind. Buyers on the other side of this coin, same thing. They have to know that it's possible, and in fact, highly likely that we end up in multiple offers. There's advantages and disadvantages to every strategy that we can take. How the process is played out has nothing to do with the buyer. It's entirely up to the seller. So again, set that expectation. They don't have to tell us if they're in highest and best or in multiple offers, and they don't have to offer us a highest and best opportunity. So we've really got to put our best foot forward at the start. And then do not expect when you write an offer as a buyer that your offer is going to maintain confidentiality. It should, but do not expect that. So if the seller says, I want you to reach out to Liz, Cindy, and Val and let them all know what terms of the offer this one is and see if they can meet or beat it, that's what this listing agent has to do. Any questions on that stuff before we go further into that? All kind of stuff that you guys know, so I went through that stuff pretty quick. So if we ask if they're asking for highest and best, they don't have to reveal it. I mean, if you ask a listing agent, hey, if you're in multiple offers, are you going to ask for highest and best? And they say yes, then they absolutely should. But reality is they don't have to. And yes, Katrina has a chat in here. You really should ask for highest and best. Agreed. You should give everybody the chance to do highest and best, but that's up to the seller. Okay, so there's a huge amount of potential misunderstanding and missed opportunities in these scenarios because of all the complexities of the process. Disclosing the terms and offer doesn't always benefit the seller. We just kind of talked about that. Offering highest and best opportunity doesn't always represent the best interest of both parties or either party. And selling the home over list price doesn't necessarily always benefit the seller. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of that in a minute. What is fair and honest is not always clear. So that makes it even harder. What I deem fair and honest might not be what Duval deems fair and honest. So we've got to really kind of keep that line as black and white and as straight as we can, which is hard. There isn't one simple way to deal with all multiple offer situations, and it is possible to sell the home twice if you are not careful. Knock on wood, this hasn't happened to us, but it is possible. Okay, so what are the seller's options when they receive multiple offers? They can do a couple different things, really 4 things. We used to say 3, but there's really 4 things. Option number 1 is to accept one offer and reject the rest and send a rejection notice. This is one of the slides you guys don't have in your PowerPoint. So I can receive multiple offers and say, this is the one I like the most. I don't care about any of the rest of them. I'm out. Just reject all the rest. I'm just going to work with this one. In the same regard, I can accept one offer, reject the rest, and then say, but I want this one as a backup and ratify this one as a backup. And we'll talk about Form 391. The third option is we can negotiate on one of them and hold the rest on standby to see if this one is going to work out. Now, be careful if you do that. And we've had a situation recently, and I'll let him chime in if he wants to, but if you negotiate one and you hold the others for similar situation, not the same situation, but you negotiate one and hold the others for consideration later on, if the first one doesn't work out, you have to watch your expiration dates. Because if they expire and you're holding on hope that if this one doesn't work, I'll go to plan 2, and plan 2 expires, you don't have plan 2 anymore, and plan 1 didn't work out, and now you're up the creek, right? So we've got to be careful of expiration dates. And then fourth option they have is to obviously ask for highest and best and then proceed how they want to from there. Good? Anybody online have questions about that stuff? Okay. Moving forward, maybe. All right, so if you're going to go the highest and best route, which typically is what happens, as Katrina said, usually you're going to find that somebody's going to offer you highest and best opportunity. What do you say? And this is the second slide that's not in your packet, but I will send it to you. First and foremost, you have to treat all the agents and all the offers the same. So you've got to give the same information to everybody. The best way to do that once you're in that multiple offer situation is one email, blind copy all the agents, and send the same thing to everybody. So this verbiage is just an example. Hello, you're receiving this email because we've received multiple offers on 123 Happy Street. The seller has asked that you please provide your highest and best offer on or before January 22nd at 6 p.m. and provide an expiration date no sooner than January 27th at 6 p.m. You can insert this part if you want to. The seller has provided suggested terms for your consideration on the attached Form 312, which we'll go to. If your clients would like to withdraw or keep their current offer, please notify us by January 22nd at 6 p.m. So it's simple. It tells them exactly what to do. It's the same message to everybody. And you could attach Form 312 that tells them what terms your client is looking for. So in your little packet, pull out Form 312. It looks like this. It says at the top, rejection of offer or counteroffer, solicitation of new offer. Kristen, what you got?
So outside of this comment or this email, how do you feel about announcing in the agent notes when you're listing that you're going to be...
Hold on. Try again, Kristen.
Okay. Can you hear me? If you can't hear me,
well,
can you hear me? Hello.
Type it in the chat box because apparently I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys can hear her, but we can't hear her. Hold on a second. Kristen, try talking again.
Hello. Hello.
Dang.
Oh, well.
Sorry, guys. I don't normally have technology issues. Oh my goodness. Oh, crips. Can somebody, Duval, do you have your computer on? Are you? I'm trying to think of how I can do this so I can hear you guys. I'm sorry, guys. Let me see if Kristen has it in the chat box. Is it best to announce in the agent notes when you know you're going to receive multiples, i.e. area 42 under 500? Probably so. I think that Kristen's question was, is it best to put in the agent notes that you know you're going to receive multiple offers? I think it's fine to set that expectation, but I bet you a lot of people already expect that, especially at those price points. So I would probably say, yeah, you can do it, but you're still going to end up having to go through the steps of notifying everybody and letting them know once you actually receive them. Sorry, guys. I don't know why I can't hear. We're just going to have to roll with it. New agents may not know. And if they don't know if they're that market an area, yeah, you're right. It's certainly helpful to put it in there. If you know you're going to end up in multiple offers, just put it in there. So couldn't hurt. All right, we're going to move forward again. Anybody else have any questions? Kind of lost my place. Sorry. I'm a struggle bus today.
Quick question,
right.
Maggie. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, great. This is Laura. Is it, and I apologize, I jumped in a little late. You may have already covered this. Is it okay to put it in the public remarks? Multiple offers due by 6 p.m. tomorrow. Is that still copacetic?
Yeah, you can. There's no reason not to. I'm thinking through the MLS rules and guidelines, and there's no reason you couldn't. So sure, why not?
Thank you.
Hey, Maggie. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Whit.
It's Whit. Just had a quick question. So in my experience, when I have opened it up to multiple, like the best and highest situation, it tends to be that one offer will just completely back out. And
yes,
that's my experience. I wanted to know if that is fairly common and more forewarn people just to anticipate that possibly happening if they go that route.
Yeah, I think it's definitely intense to to the degree that a lot of people don't want to participate in multiple offers. So you have to set that expectation with your seller. It is a risk when we use multiple offers or when we use highest and best strategy that we will lose some. So sometimes it might be better to say, hey, is this your highest and best? You're not necessarily asking, but is this your highest and best? And are your clients comfortable participating in a multiple offer negotiation? And if somebody says, no, they're not, okay, well, we are multiple offers. So see you later.
Yeah, definitely.
You're going to have to kind of play your cards.
Yeah. If there's one that clearly had maybe preferential terms or financing or something, you'd hate for them to be scared away because they just don't want to compete, even though they were seriously interested.
Right. Yeah. And the hard part is it's really up to the seller. That's why I stress the seller controls the process. So Paul had just put in there, he lost out on one. He didn't even know he was in multiple offers. I mean, I had just shared that story a minute ago, so did I. So unfortunately, we don't know if the seller is going to allow us to give our highest and best from the buyer side perspective. So we've got to just put our best foot forward going, straight out the gate if it's going to end up in a tight situation where it's probably going to be multiple offers. At the end of the day, the best thing to tell your buyer clients is if you're okay losing the home at this price, then this is the price we should offer. So if Patty's my client and she says, well, do you think $250 is enough? And I say, well, Patty, if it sells tomorrow for $250, are you going to be okay with that? And she says, no, I probably would have paid $260. Okay, well then let's go pay $260. Does that make sense?
Meg,
okay, so let's talk. Go ahead, Ashley.
Sorry. And you might have said this. So I had the sellers this summer. They weren't sure if they were going to ask everyone for highest and best. So it is correct if you tell one buyer's agent, hey, it looks like we've got multiple offers coming in, you then have to tell every buyer's agent that. So not necessarily that you then have to call for it because everyone knows up front they're most likely going into, you at least have one offer on the table, and that they might not have the opportunity because it's up to the seller, obviously. But hey, since I told buyer's agent 1, I then have to tell buyer's agent 2, 3, and 4 that there is a multiple offer situation.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep. You just have to keep in mind, you can't give anybody an unfair advantage by providing information to some and not to all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the easiest way to kind of think through it. Me sharing this information with Val, does that give her an unfair advantage over Liz's client?
So that could be since everyone knew that you don't necessarily then have to go back and send a rejection of offer and solicitation, that everyone knew they were going into it. I mean, obviously,
right.
And up to the sellers, they might want to anyway, but okay.
Yep.
Maggie.
Okay. So, yeah.
Sorry, that is slightly different from if your sellers just want to negotiate with one party, even if they have multiple offers. Like if you have told one party, we have multiple offers now, and your sellers direct you not to tell the other parties, we can't do that, right? Like if we've told one party, we have to do clear communication with all 3 parties that there are multiple offers.
Right, because you're not really it doesn't really matter if you're just communicating with one and they just want to counter and negotiate with one. They don't have to know that there's multiple offers anyway, right? It's irrelevant to the negotiation anyway.
Right.
So don't share that information where it binds you to then have to share with other people. Just negotiate with that one.
Don't share with anybody
offer.
if there are multiples. Just, yeah.
Right.
Okay. What if an agent directly asks you, are there any other offers on this property? And your seller has...
My seller has not permitted me to disclose.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, you can't lie. But
Right.
if your seller has permitted you not to disclose.
Right. Obviously. Right. Just following their directions in a legal way. Okay. Thank you, Max.
Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. So this form 312, this is your best form even if you receive an offer that is really, really low, forget about multiple offers. You receive an offer that's really, really low and your client just doesn't want to counter. That's really frustrating for you guys as a listing agent. At least get them to sign this form, because what this form says is the seller appreciates the potential buyer's interest in purchasing the property, but the seller does not accept and rejects the buyer's offer. Seller is not making an offer or counteroffer. Instead, the seller is inviting the buyer to submit a new offer to the seller. Seller suggests the buyer's offer be the buyer's highest and best terms and include new terms that equal or exceed these suggestions. So you could put whatever you want on there, whatever the seller wants. So this is a soft way to say, hey, we're rejecting your offer, but obviously the sellers have to sign it. They don't have to put many terms on there. You could just put full price. You could put no due diligence, repair procedure only. You could put a certain closing date, whatever. And when you're in highest and best, you don't even have to use this form. But if you really want to get specific on what the seller wants, maybe it's a certain closing date and a 6-month lease back no more than their current mortgage amount. We see a lot of that going on right now. So use this form and you can detail that out. Any questions on this form? Once, twice, go on. Okay. All right, so tips on handling the multiple offer situation. Once you're in it, slow down. You and the seller control the process. Think cautiously through every single step. Make sure your communication is key and ask questions. We're going to talk about a backup offer. Be sure that you understand the backup offer process. And then obviously we can go through creative options on asking how, if you're the buyer's agent, how we can better win, increase our odds to better likely that we will win in multiple offers. Rejecting the offer. So we kind of just talked through form 312. At minimum, if you reject any offer, this form that has no number, it's at the top. It's got the LLR logo on the left and Carolina 1 on the right. It says, pursuant to South Carolina real estate license law, this offer rejection form is promulgated by the South Carolina Real Estate Commission for use when a real estate purchase offer is rejected without a counter. So you guys are required to send this at minimum signed by you when you reject an offer. Your seller doesn't have to sign it, but you have to sign it. And this is really, really helpful when you are representing the buyer and they reject your offer. Digit was on the side actually not too long ago. And the agent just said, yeah, we rejected and we went with something else. Okay, well then send me a formal rejection notice because my client, we heard nothing from you. And I've got to go to my client with something because guess what they're wondering? Did you really even present my offer? So this form really, really helps with that. And when Digit asked them for it, then he received it back relatively quickly and was able to go to his client and say, look, they did present it, but they did reject it. So it helps you guys a lot too. And it also puts kind of the agents on the line saying, yeah, I did present it. It's not a Carolina 1 form, but it's in the, just doesn't have a form number. It's an SCR form. So it's in the all library. It's on Zip Forms if that's what you're getting at. Yeah. Just look for real estate rejection form. All right. Any question on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Variable commissions. Somebody tell me what a variable commission is. Could be. Duval said transaction brokerage. Yes. Yes. For you guys at home, Patty Vick had the correct answer. She said, if I'm the listing agent and I receive an offer, I agree to reduce my commission from say 6% to 5% if I bring the buyer. That's a variable commission. Wouldn't you like to know that as the buyer's agent submitting an offer in a multiple offer situation? Heck yeah. So if Greg has a property listed and Greg calls me and I'm the buyer's agent and I'm representing Dominique and I say, Dominique, there are multiple offers right now. There's 3 offers on the table. One of them is the listing agent's and it's a variable commission. She's going to say, what the heck is that? Right? Well, that means that Greg is going to reduce his commission if the seller accepts his offer, which means that the seller is going to net more if they take Greg's offer. So you're going to have to increase your offer by the amount difference that the commission makes up if you really want to be competitive. Yes. We do not like dual agency because it's so risky, especially in today's market. It's very, very, very hard to do dual agency and do it right without risk that outweighs or underweighs the reward. So when you're representing a buyer in a multiple offer situation, you always want to ask. It's on MLS as a required field that you have to check. But I'm not so sure that everybody else on the other side of Carolina 1, outside of Carolina 1, understand actually what that means. So always ask, is it a variable commission and are any of the offers yours? Okay. The other part of it is when you're representing a buyer's agent, now that we have transaction brokerage, a lot of companies are putting in their 3% to a buyer's agent, 2% to a transaction brokerage agent. That doesn't really even make any sense to me. I don't think they understand why they're doing that. So keep that in mind when you're writing an offer, not because the commission is the most important thing, but you just want to be aware. And just ask the question. If you're not sure, just say to them, hey, Cindy, why did you offer 2% to transaction brokerage and 3% to a buyer's agent? I mean, I get it to some degree because there's liability there, but it shouldn't change anything. Good? Okay. Another tip for handling multiple offers. Please, 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 for the love of God, if you don't do anything else with multiple offers, use a net sheet. So there are a couple of different net sheet options you can use. Just use the one that you're most comfortable with. Back in the day, we used this thing on Rose that you went in on C1 Rose. Greg remembers this. Patty, you remember. Duval, you probably even remember. It was a like formulated net sheet on Rose, and it was all wonky, and you had to like type in the numbers. It looked like it was made in 1986, the year I was born. But now we have really cool things like Palm Agent. So this picture on the left here is a graphic from Palm Agent. And remember, that's paid for by your mortgage lenders, which is awesome. So what you'll do, and I'll show you guys this another time, I'll send out a tutorial later today, but you go in and you just type in the seller net sheet, type in the numbers, and then at the bottom, you're going to hit compute. And then the top left, it says multiple offers. And you click multiple offers and you add in all the other offers, all their terms, and it gives you this beautiful net sheet. So side-by-side comparison, and then it also prints out a net sheet for each individual property. So if you've got five offers, you have 5 separate net sheets and then 1 sheet comparing all 5 side by side. Super powerful for the seller. This is a game changer. It makes their decision so easy almost every time until the emotional part comes in of like the letter the buyers wrote, right? But then there is also a net sheet on Excel on the Google Drive. If that's easier for you, have at it. Just don't do what I did and screw up your formulas and pay yourself $3. Make sure your commissions and your formulas are correct and you pay yourself 3%, not $3. Dave was really happy with me that day. But whatever works, just use the system that works. And if you need help with net sheets, let me know. Okay, escalation clauses. What is an escalation clause? Somebody describe escalation clauses to me. Yes. Cindy said where you go above a highest offer for a certain fixed amount. So the form that was backwards when we first sent out the documents, sorry about that, is the escalation clause. This is pretty old, to be honest. There's an editable version on the Google Drive, and you can change the date because I realize it says 2020. But basically, this just says, hey, the property located at 123 Happy Street is where I'm making my offer. If prior to the seller's ratification, if the seller receives 1 or more additional written and bona fide offers to purchase the property with terms acceptable to the seller and from the seller, which the seller would receive an equal or higher net than the net reflected in the current offer, then the contract sales price should increase by a certain dollar amount. Usually we see in there 1,000, 3,000, lower price points, we might see 500. More and more now that we see so many multiple offer situations, it's usually 1,000 to 3,000 that we're seeing in there. And then it has a maximum above, not more than 375, whatever that is. So let's say I write an offer at 360 and I know they're going to be in multiple offers, but my clients are really willing to pay 375 if they have to. I'll put 375 in that max. I'll write my offer at 360 and I'll put my increments maybe at $5,000. So I'll increase above any other offer at $5,000 up to 375. Good. Then the rest of that says, if another offer includes an escalation term, this automatic increase will be applied to the maximum escalation of the highest competing escalation addendum. So don't get caught up in the verbiage. It's very, very simple. The seller has to provide, the third paragraph there, the seller has to provide a copy of the offer that you have exceeded. They can get rid of all the confidential terms, and they should, but they have to show you that there is another offer in play that exceeded the number that you originally went in at. Any changes in the sales price under this addendum will be effective and binding. Buyer and seller agree to initial the changes, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Yes, we'll go into that in 1 second. Duval said, when should I use it and when is the biggest benefit for using it? Let me see. Dana said, I almost just used one of these in a multiple offer situation, but my client didn't like that you had to put your max amount on the form. What is to stop the seller from countering at your max amount or having the neighbor write a fake offer for the max amount? There really isn't anything to stop them from that. You do show a little bit of your cards, but that's just what it is. I mean, you can say to them, hey, I offered 360 and my max was 375, but I'm not willing to pay 375 unless you have another offer. Because keep in mind, you also have appraisals in there too. Leah's question is, how often is this used? I think it's used pretty often nowadays. We used to always ask the seller, is your seller willing to accept an escalation clause? Because some people don't like them and some companies don't like them. Casina Group does not like escalation clause. In fact, Byron King, our attorney for our president for SCR, he doesn't like escalation clauses. So it just depends. Katrina is right. Make sure if you use it, the listing agent's prepared for it and understands it and knows how to use it. Hopefully they have a good broker that can help. Digit said he's received them he's used it and received them in the last 2 months. Leah said, so you can say my buyer is willing to pay over $2,000 of best offer. Yep. Perfect. So Duval's question, when should you use it? And what's the biggest benefit? I mean, the biggest benefit is it really does give your client their best effort. Like they really feel like, hey, I've made my best effort, but I haven't overstretched myself. I think that's the general take a buyer gets. You know, they're like, I've tried really hard. I've given it my all, but I didn't overspend and I didn't overpay, because we know that's one of buyers' biggest concerns. When should you use it? It really depends. I mean, it depends on the seller, if they're willing to accept one. It depends on your buyer and their financial situation. I think if you really want to get competitive and creative on a multiple offer situation, consider using it every time. You just have to make sure, like Katrina had said, that it's done right and that the listing agent is prepared for it and can actually negotiate it. They do have to show you the other offer though, so keep that part in mind. We've had it before too, and this is also worth noting. We've had situations before where, because it's not a standard form, anybody could write up their own escalation clause and it could say anything. So it doesn't necessarily match what ours says. So we've had one where, like Leah said, my buyer is willing to pay, let's just say $3,000 over the highest price. But then somebody else came in when we had the listing and offered $5,000 above the seller's highest net. So those are two very different things, price and net. So this one that I just showed you goes off of the seller's net, which forces you to do a net sheet. Price is just top number. So I could have the highest price, but then if I have $5,000 in closing costs, my net to the seller is going to change very significantly. So we've, like, going back to Katrina's point, ask the seller, are you comfortable with an escalation clause? My buyers would really like to put forth their best effort and use an escalation clause. Will the seller consider it? So if you've got 2 escalation clauses, bring it to me and we've got to really work through that, because you're literally playing dominoes there. Each one going one side, the other side, one side, the other side. Any other questions on the escalation clause? Once, twice? Okay. All right, so we went through the forms. Form 312, rejection of offer with solicitation of new offer. We're going to go into some scenarios here in a second if we didn't already hit them. The SCR rejection form on every single offer. So I put form no number because it doesn't have a number, unfortunately. Every offer you reject has to have that. Every time you receive a rejection, it has to have that rejection form. And then the escalation clause, which of course is on the drive, and I will edit it and put that in the attachments when I send this out later today. Okay, real life scenario number 1. This happened maybe about a month ago. We represent the sellers who are selling a tenant occupied townhome that's in rough shape with a tenant of 15 plus years with 3 months to go on the lease. Okay, so put that in your head. Don't look at any of the other details yet for a second. The seller is a tenant, or is a landlord. There is a tenant in the townhome. He's lived there for 15 plus years and it's in rough shape. So the first thing that comes to mind when I hear that is, ooh, an as-is contract would be real nice, right? Okay, so we put it on the market. We actually didn't even put it on the market. We went through our list programs and then put it on the market. We received multiple offers. We had 3 offers. None of them are cash. Elizabeth. 2 are full price with repair procedure and appraisal contingencies. 1 is full price with due diligence, but is as is and has no appraisal contingency. How do you advise and counsel your sellers? I should have put my animations in here so I didn't give it away. All right, so let's think through it. You've got 3 offers that are full price, right? 2 of the offers that are full price are repair procedure and have an appraisal contingency. So most of our offers have appraisal contingencies, so that's not too far out of the norm. Repair procedure, okay, they did something to make the seller feel a little bit more secure. But then this other one came in and it's also full price. We got real excited because we saw that as is. And then they're like, and I don't even need an appraisal. Okay, that's also exciting because we're going to try to stretch this price for this seller as much as we can. But it's due diligence. What do you do?
I would say, this is Whitley. I would say it really depends on the seller's ability. Like, do they have funds to, how concerned are they about having to do repairs? And then to their knowledge, is there anything huge that they're really borderline worried about on a home inspection? I don't know.
Okay, good thought. Good thought.
Maggie, I would say, oh, I'm sorry, somebody's talking.
That's okay. It's hard to do with 2 scenarios. Liz said we could do the due diligence, but put a big termination fee in. Good option. Okay.
I would also say, what is it that the buyer is concerned about? And let's just write that into the contract as a contingency and switch to repair procedure with, you know, whatever that individual concern is as a contingency.
Okay. What do you mean? Okay, so like disclosures you're talking about? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Duval's talking about so for those of you guys at home, disclosures and what is disclosed up front, what kind of information do we already know about the property and that sort of thing. Good point, good thought. There's one little thing in here that I tweaked. This scenario I tweaked just for a second to see if you guys would catch it, and you haven't caught it yet. And I have an arrow pointing to it.
You can't have due diligence and as is both checked, right?
Oh, gosh.
Yay, 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 yay. Yes, that is 100% true. You can't have due diligence and as is. We received an offer yesterday that had both of those, so that's why I put it in there. In this real life scenario, so we're clear on that, right? You can't have due diligence and as is. But what? That's exactly what this offer did. So Greg's saying, so, but somebody could write an offer that says, we're going to buy it as is, but we're going to put due diligence in there because we want the right to walk away in case we do an inspection and there's something crazy going on. And that's exactly what this guy did. So my other thought in my head, because we weren't really sure on price, we thought no appraisal contingency. Yes, that's really appealing, but you could get your appraisal done during the due diligence period and walk because due diligence. But really you're walking because it didn't appraise. And we either wouldn't know that or it wouldn't matter because you have due diligence. So whenever you see due diligence, Digit put in the chat box, run from due diligence, haha. Okay, due diligence has its pros and cons, right? From a buyer side, I'm like due diligence all day long, right? But from a seller side, I'm like, I don't know if that's a good choice. So point being, due diligence is a contingency above everything there is in the contract. So appraisal contingency outlasts due diligence typically. So then you have another layer. Financing will outlast due diligence, right? CL 100 will outlast due diligence because your due diligence period usually ends 2 weeks after the contract's ratified. But all those other contingencies usually don't end until a week before closing for financing, the day of closing, right? So even though this one had a had no appraisal contingency, it was still due diligence. So what Dana had said is a huge, huge point. Go to the seller, and this is what our listing agent did. Go to the, not seller, excuse me, the buyer's agent and say, what is it that they're so concerned about? So just like what Greg said. So what are you looking for in this inspection? And in this scenario, the buyer wanted to crawl under the house and see what was wrong with the house. He wanted to make sure everything was good. He was a young buyer. He was leaving the tenant in there. He just wanted to make sure the crawl space was good. So I said, okay, well, tell him to go under the crawl space tomorrow and then modify his offer if he needs to. And that's what he did. So we waited. He did his due diligence up front. There was no due diligence contingency. We waited to ratify it until he was settled and confident. And Elizabeth, did you guys actually change the terms after he went under the house? I don't remember. You're muted if you're talking. I can't see you. Well, we'll have to see. But if that is the case, like let's say I want to know if my commute to work is going to be okay. Well, figure it out, drive it tomorrow, and then come back to us with your offer.
Oh, here I am.
So do as much. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
He asked for closing costs, but he kept the price the same. He asked for $3,000 in closing costs, but he kept the price the same. It was $5,000 over. So it ended up being $2,000 over the price.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, and that was a good point there. I'm glad you brought that up. So he offered $5,000 over list price, which also alerted us, oh, we might not appraise. So no appraisal contingency looked real appealing. And then when he went under the house, he said, okay, but I need some money for whatever conditions I want. So I'm going to frame it as closing costs. Maybe I want to do some work under the house, whatever. So she ended up giving him $5,000 in closing or $3,000 in closing, whatever. And she's still $2,000 over price.
Yeah.
But no appraisal contingency.
Right. There's no appraisal, nothing, no contingency except for financial.
Yep. Perfect. Good job, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions on that scenario? Tricky one, right? More and more and more, I'm seeing no appraisal contingencies because prices are going up, not even in multiple offers, but because prices are going up so much, people are saying, oh, I won't do an appraisal contingency, but I want due diligence. Yeah. We got to be smart about that stuff. Okay, real life scenario number 2. We represent a seller who receives multiple offers. They ratify a cash as is contract and do not ratify a backup. What could go wrong? Real life scenario number 2. Nope, it's as is. Ratify a cash as is contract and do not ratify a backup. What could go wrong? So read the little fine print there. Just because the contract doesn't provide a right for a buyer to terminate. So this buyer has no right to terminate because of financing, unless they go below their cash, I suppose. They have no right to terminate because of inspections, but they terminate anyway. No appraisal contingency. So what happens is you end up in this really crappy situation. You go to your seller, like, well, we thought we picked this offer, but we didn't because the guy decided to breach the contract. So again, set proper expectations. Digit's dealing with this right now and luckily has recovered it because he's a good agent. But this guy just decided, I don't care. I don't care. I wrote an as-is contract. I'm walking.
Hey, Maggie, can you hear me?
Yes.
He actually came back. We ratified at 9:30 one night. The next morning at 8 a.m., his buyer's agent reached out to me and asked for a home warranty. And I had to explain what as is. And we went back and forth. And by 3 o'clock that day, he breached his contract because he gave us a deadline to give him a home warranty by 3 p.m.
On an as-is contract.
On an as-is contract.
Yeah, Juval said that was a good one to lose. We agreed for sure. Wasn't the right buyer, that's for sure. And Digit's seller literally said that to him yesterday. He's like, Digit, I trust what you're doing. I know you're doing everything in my best interest. That's not my buyer. That's okay. Let's go back on the market. So that's literally taking a pit moment and turning it into a peak moment, right? So what are the seller's options in that regard? Oh, I didn't put it on there. When that happens and that guy goes away, now Digit's back on the market. Let's say he resells it. What is the option with that guy who walked away? What can the seller do with that guy? Yes. Liz said he could technically take him to court for the difference if there is one. So obviously we kept his earnest money. That's an obvious. And he was willing because he was just, I'm out of it. I want to walk away. Clearly his buyer's agent didn't do a good enough job explaining what as is in the buyer's contract agreement, what that part means, but that's fine. But now when Digit goes back on the market, let's say it takes Digit's seller, it's not going to happen, but 6 months to sell. And let's say his mortgage payment is $1,000 a month. That's $6,000 damages, right? Caused by that guy walking away and breaching the contract because of the fact that he breached, not because he had a right to walk away, but because he breached. So there's $6,000. Let's say he sells for $5,000 less than the price he was ratified with that original buyer. That's $5,000. That buyer who walked away, even though he gave us his $2,000, is actually on the hook for that 6 plus 5. If the seller decides to pursue that. And Digit had those conversations in depth. And even though the seller was not hearing him at the moment because he was so upset, there's a lot of risk in that for the guy who walked away, but there's a lot of protection for the buyer or for the seller, excuse me. But we have to go through the steps because right now we don't have any damages. We have to be able to prove the damages, and that can't happen until we sell, close, and then say, okay, looking back, what damages did this cause me? What'd you say? Yep. Yes, Liz said on the flip side, it's really good for your buyers to understand that too. Leslie, no, I don't think the earnest money is in dispute because Digit, they just gave the earnest money, right?
No, they actually didn't even pay it. He canceled that 3 p.m. deadline.
Oh, before we collected it?
Before it was due, yes.
So technically, your seller is still entitled to it, even though we hadn't collected it at that point yet.
Right.
You just have to collect it. You'd still have to collect it if the seller was receiving it. Most of the time when a seller is breaching or a buyer is breaching in that way, they don't care. Like they know. And honestly, the likelihood, if you give up your earnest money, the likelihood of the seller coming back to you afterwards, especially if they've been made whole, you know, it's a good market. Digit's going to sell the house. That's not a problem. But in a hard market or hard times, it's not likely that you're going to get sued in that regard, but that is actually what you are potentially up against. All right. Any other questions on that scenario? We've got one more and then we'll wrap. Okay. I represent a buyer and we keep losing in multiple offers. I hear this all the time. I hate it. What can I do differently? So a couple of these are obvious. Search more creatively. You can search active contingent with a kick out. Dominique, did you show that one? Not yet. Tomorrow you're showing it or something? The one, you did? Is she writing an offer? No. So Dominique had one yesterday where she was searching active contingent with a kick out. It's another Carolina One agent actually. She called them and they're like, absolutely, show the house, show the house. So that led her to believe the house that they have to sell must not be under contract yet, right? Because if Cindy has a house to sell, but she's under contract to purchase mine, and Greg comes in and writes an offer, and Greg's buyer doesn't have a house to sell, Cindy has to either get her house under contract or remove that contingency. Otherwise, Greg's offer comes in primary position. So search active contingent with a kick out. You could test the waters with 8.0. What do I mean by that? I have to remember this is recorded. This is recorded. So what is 8.0? The clear cooperation? What does that mean? No more pocket listings? I'm sure you guys know it. You just don't know the name of it, right? Of course. So when I say test the waters with 8.0, this happened with somebody recently. I don't remember who. Karen Tawes, I think. saw one of those emails that you guys get 30,000 times a day that says, hey, does anybody have this coming up on the market? Okay, well, one day from advertising it to anyone outside of your company, it has to go in MLS. So if I put something out in the reverse of that and they say, hey, everybody, I've got blah, blah, blah coming on the market in Old Village, blah, 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 price point, blah, 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 and I'm going to list it in 3 weeks, no good, unless I'm only doing that to Carolina One. So if you see something like that, and it matches your buyer's needs and it's outside of Carolina One, jump on it. But don't do it in the reverse order. Don't do it from the seller side. Remove as many contingencies as possible. Obviously, that's a good idea in any regard, but don't do it in that it's a detriment to your buyer. Use an escalation clause. We talked about that. Offer to be a backup. A lot of times, if the person who has a house to sell doesn't have their house under contract, that puts you in a pretty good position. So offer to be a backup, write a letter and send a video and get your lenders involved. Have Andrew and Cheryl send an intro email. Hey, I just want to let you know, my name's Cheryl Lane. I represent Peggy's buyer. They're well qualified. You have nothing to worry about. We're good to go. Question? Okay. Add proof of funds for your down payment. So this is different, but a good idea. So if I'm putting 20% down, and I know I have the 20% in my bank account, why not show it? Why not redact all my private information and say, Duval, when you send my offer up to them, send proof of my down payment and my qualifying letter from my mortgage lender and this video from Andrew and Cheryl saying, I am good to go. I'm solid. We're not going to have a financing issue. It's a hugely awesome question. We had an issue recently where we're the listing agent and we didn't verify, no, we were the buyer's agent, excuse me. And the listing agent did not verify where our down payment was coming from. And it was coming from the sale of another house, but it wasn't contingent. We just didn't have it in liquid funds yet. So we didn't have to make it contingent. And they flipped out on us because the contract got delayed because the sale of that house didn't close on time. But if they had verified where the down payment was coming from, that wouldn't have happened. So modify your inspection period to cap at a specific dollar amount. This is kind of a different option. So if I'm writing a repair procedure offer, it's not as good as is, but I maybe don't want to buy it as is, but I won't make you spend more than $5,000 on repairs. Something like that. $3,000, $2,500, whatever that number is. Pay some or all of the seller's closing costs. So this is very interesting. My mom actually told me that she did this like 3 days ago and won in the multiple offers. She has a buyer who's very well qualified. He's paying mostly cash. And he said, well, how do I do something completely different? And she's like, well, don't ask for closing costs. Don't do this. Don't put an appraisal contingency in there. Go as is if you can. He's like, I want an inspection right. So they did that. And she's like, why don't you pay for the seller's closing costs? So it's more net to the seller, but it's not more price. So that he said, and they said that's why they won. So it's a creative idea. Well, it's more net to the seller, but it's not more in price. So if he was financing, his mortgage wouldn't be, let's say it's $350 and he offered to pay $3,000 of the seller's closing costs. He's not financing $353. He's just paying more in cash at closing because he's paying his closing costs plus the seller's. I think that's an easy one that would be a great differentiator for you guys. And then the other thing I put in here, if you want to know what the seller's thinking, just ask. So it is really simple, and it's almost a golden ticket to call the listing agent and say, hey, Peggy, tell me what your sellers want in their offer. And most of the time, the agent on the other side, outside of Carolina One, is going to be like, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, noted, great, thank you. Goodbye. And then call them again. I'm submitting my offer. Here's what we're going to present. Is there anything we should change? Sure. Actually, change this and change that. And you're like, great. Thanks for violating your fiduciary. But seriously, if you want to know what the seller is asking, just call and ask the listing agent. They will tell you what you need to know more times than not. Yeah, simple things. Yep. That's a good point in terms of closing date. Greg said, especially closing date, things that are really easy to find out. I was looking at MLS the other day, and twice when I was just doing some search for somebody, I think I was pulling comps for somebody. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But twice in the agent notes, it said that the seller wants to lease back for a certain number of months. And that's going to keep happening because there's nowhere for people to go. So we're going to start to see more and more of those reverse contingencies where it's contingent upon me finding a house to buy rather than a house to sell. Or we're going to see more of the, I want to close by this date, but lease back because I need to find a place to go. So simple questions, either read the notes or call and say, you know, does your seller need a lease back? If so, for how long? If you're the only one that asks that question and the listing agent doesn't put it in the notes and 4 offers come in and yours is the only one that offers a lease back, and that's exactly what the sellers need, you're in. So, okay. Anything else before we wrap? Whitley says, I always like to confirm what closing date is preferred by the seller. Most people will tell you for sure. Anything else? All right. Hopefully helpful. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for being online. Yes, I'll resend out the slides, and the ones that are missing will be included in there. And then I'll also send you out the recording. So what?